Hello, good morning for those who are following us in Brazil, and good afternoon or good evening for those who are in other areas of the world. I'm Rodrigo Nejan with SaferNet in Brazil, and we are celebrating the 14th edition of the Global Safer Internet Day in Brazil, in sync with over 200 countries in the world, addressing issues related to digital safety, well-being, positive use, and healthy of the internet, so that we can together build a more positive internet. On behalf of SaferNet, and also together in an initiative with NIC.br and CGI.br and our other partners, we will now move to a very special panel, a global panel, very diverse. We have representatives from 4 continents of the world that will share their perspectives and experiences on this topic that is crucial, and where it is crucial to consider the diversity of not only regions and countries, but also individuals, so that we can provide well-being, as we saw with Professor Mimi Ito's. And we will discuss some lessons learned related to digital citizenship and inclusion in the pandemic, as well as some of the issues. So I will talk to Fabio Senne, who is the coordinator of research at Cetic.br, who coordinates crucial research as ITC in education, and to give more evidences of internet habits in Brazil. He is going to hold this panel in English, so we will have original audio, and we also have translation if you want, and you can follow the translation into Portuguese if you prefer that. Once again, I would like to thank Fabio for accepting this invitation and for the possibility of leading this panel. Fabio? Thank you, Rodrigo. First, I would like to thank SaferNet and NIC.br for this invitation to participate in such an important event. I will switch to English to make the interaction with our guests easier.
Thank you very much. As part of the Safer Internet Day, I would like to welcome you to the panel Lessons Learned and New Challenges Around Digital Inclusion and Citizenship During the Pandemic. I'm Fabio Senne. I'm Survey Coordinator at Cetic.br, NIC.br. And I'm joined by a great group of speakers coming from different regions of the world, as Rodrigo mentioned. So in the next minutes, we will draw on different expertise and regional experiences to reflect on how the COVID-19 affected digital inclusion and citizenship, but above all, to see what are the perspectives for the future and how can we really engage children and young people in this debate. So we're going to have a very good round of speakers and perspectives around the world. And please be aware that you can find more information on the speakers in the events website. So for the sake of time, I will let them present themselves and highlight any information from their activities they want to share with you. And so to start, first of all, I would like to give the floor to our Aidam Amenyah from Ghana. And consider your really impressive work on ChildOnline Africa and having the African perspective. We would like to hear from you what are the main lessons learned in this particular period, and what are the new challenges for digital inclusion that you envision in the near future. So what did we learn in your region, in your continent, and what do you envision for the near future? Please, you have the floor for the next 10 minutes.
Right. Okay, thank you, Fabio, and thank you to SaferNet for the opportunity to join this discussion today. So my name is Aidam Amenyah, rightly said. I lead a team at the ChildOnline Africa, which is an African organization which focuses on advocacy and research, but advocating with and for children. So what that means is we involve children a lot in our designs and our programming, just to hear the first-hand information from them. So we have a number of programs, but for this particular discussion, we are focusing on what we call the Africa Digital Leaders Program. So the Africa Digital Leaders Program, it's a hybrid sort of fellowship program for young people. The goal is to help them hone their skills, those who might have gotten the skills already, and those who have not, acquire the basic citizenship skills before they venture into the space online. What we've realized is that most of our communities and schools are largely offline. So we've had to find a way of bridging that conversation, getting some of them hard copies of information just so they will be abreast with things. So as part of the Digital Leaders Program, we've decided that we're going to sort of incorporate the digital intelligence set of skills. So the 8 digital skills which are taught in DQ are introduced. So DQ program is used as an entry point for the Africa Digital Leaders Program. Our goal is to have about at least 5,000 young people by 2030 who are with the requisite skills and can both fully say that they are indeed Africa, digital leaders for Africa. So that's our goal. We haven't achieved much yet. We started this just in 2020, this particular program. We are on, and it's a reality. In 2020, with the coming of the COVID-19, in fact, we have realized that the infrastructure support, which is talked about in most reports, are not real. They haven't gone far, actually, because people try to connect from places and they have difficulty connecting. This one is not about data issues, but it's about connectivity issues. So you see your device with full bars of network, but you are not able to connect. And other times you need to be switching from one network to another because of the instability in the network. One other thing which also came to the fore has been that so many people are without the right skill sets to engage. So we started here getting reports about sextortion, among other things, because by virtue of the fact that people have access and they are bored at home, they are forced to connect with the wrong people. Another one thing leads to another, and there's so many things come to the fore. So that is also one of the key things we realize in our space as far as the use is concerned. The other thing has to do with the fact that we say data is affordable, but to what extent? The ordinary person there hears about that, and the peri-urban areas cannot afford basic data in order to connect to even their classrooms. So it became a source of worry for us again. The other thing has to do with even electricity in some areas. Just for them to connect to needed platforms was nowhere to be found. Some were relying on solar, but then that one too was not regular. So it's been so many issues here and there, but then by way of trying to even address them, which I'll highlight on later, I wouldn't say much has changed, but we just had to find a way of adapting to the situation and then finding other ways of engaging. One prominent thing again has to do with assistive devices for persons with disability. These young people with disability some of them seem to have devices, all right, but citizenship contents are not getting to them because one, it's either difficult for them to translate from the speech to text as they would have to relate to, or from the text to the speech which they will have to connect with. So that also became a big issue. So most of them have the devices and they are able to do normal things, receiving calls and co, but they are not able to put the devices to use by creating content or making use of available content on that. Challenges, access to tools, as I've mentioned, was one of the key challenges. Even the government tried to come in, but it wasn't sufficient enough. The increase in unacceptable behaviors of young people. So some of them are engaging in the unacceptable behavior, knowing very well that it's wrong, but the fact that they're going to get social media likes for it, they engage or they indulge all the same, and then they go with that. Now, so one thing which also became a huge challenge for us has to do with the language needs of the people. Most of the young people are able to read basic stuff, but when it comes to the terminologies and jargons that they are confronted with in English language, we would have wished that we have those done in a local language for them to be able to relate to properly. So the skill set to even make those ones available was a huge challenge during the pandemic, because everybody is now forced to go online to do one thing or another, but then you don't have the solution. Age appropriate content was also another thing. Some of the contents which are churned out to the people, we realize that they are above them, and so they find it very difficult to relate, and we want to break it down for them. And at that point, you are also wondering, okay, what about the other people? Because we haven't thought about the age disaggregation at the initial stage. It was difficult having people of different economic backgrounds, different age groups, and all of that come into the program and then be effective at what we were doing. The other thing has to do with the fact that I have realized a 14-year-old child in Singapore who is able to complete a task cannot be compared to a 14-year-old child in Africa. Clearly, you have to be looking at a 16-year-old or 18 in order to catch up on that. So DQ program is targeted at age 8 to 14, but then we had to open up the bracket a bit, make it available to 16 and 18, because we saw that no, people at 16 could not easily manage the task of the 14-year-old. So that also became a bit of a challenge in our implementation of the Leaders program. But we're trying. So instead of completing a task for a year, we are looking at they completing the same task for 1.5 years or more, at their own pace, at their own consumption level. Maybe the last thing I will touch on will be maturation. So I think I just spoke about that indirectly, but then yes, so maturity for most of the young people is also key in some of the things that we do. So when we go, for instance, when we go to a community where you realize that people have enrolled on the program, they have their skills intact, but then interacting with them, you realize, no, something is missing somewhere. Then you now start to probe what is happening. But then in the course of that, we realize they have adults who have assisted them in tackling the tests. So in that case, there's no fairness, but because their age is up there and they want to belong to the program, they resorted to cheating, and adults are aiding that kind of process. So we're thinking around how we can actually work with the DQ Institute in order to tailor-make some of the programs for our audience, just so we'll be making the most of whatever it is that they are being engaged on. How do we address some of these situations, or how are we tackling them? We are calling for collaboration between parents and teachers, because when we have the support at home, it will go a long way to supporting the classroom situation. When we have the support from teachers to parents at the community level who serve as the frontliners, it will help them in addressing some of the challenges that we are confronted with. And then role modeling, because sometimes we have engaged on citizenship and stuff, but then because mommy and daddy are sitting at home, coming to the dining table with their devices, it's difficult for the children to comply with the rules of engagement. So clearly, role modeling is key. And we also working at training for teachers, parents, and the children themselves. So today, for instance, we're taking part in the digital citizenship test, assessment test, just so we know from the index where our countries are and what can be done in order to help push the process forward. And we also have to be intentional. We are telling the teachers they have to be intentional in engaging with the young people. If we are disengaging the ICT lessons from lifestyle or citizenship lessons, it wouldn't augur well for us. They might think that they're still living in two different worlds, but we want a situation where they know that, oh no, there isn't much difference now. So whatever I'm doing offline is a reflection of what I'm doing online is a reflection of what I'm doing offline, and vice versa. So essentially, yes. And then we've also made a case for teacher preparation. At the teacher training level, most of the teachers have no idea what online safety or responsible internet use is about. All they know is, okay, you need to connect to the computer, do ABC, send emails and all. All the other things are silent when it comes to their curriculum. So we're trying to influence that to see how best that can go. And the fact is that the Africa Digital Leaders Program is helping us to sort of influence a number of policies and frameworks that are in existence. Because hitherto, yes, we are influencing policy, but based on government's own policies. But this time around, we take the content of schools and measure them as against the standards. Are we meeting them, or we are far behind? And when that happens, then we start the engagement to know how to retrofit some of them in order to also meet the best standards which are available. So I'm sure I've touched base on what I'm supposed to speak on. I don't know if you have questions. What
no, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, João, for your very interesting presentation. I think adaptation is one key word of your presentation that I think is very important, and also this dynamic interaction between skills and connectivity. So how each one influence. And this gives me the opportunity to call Sabrina Vorbau and João Pedro. Sabrina is from the Insafe and in European Schoolnet Belgium, and João Pedro from Youth Panel Portugal. And Sabrina, as part of the organization that created and globally coordinates the world's Safer Internet Day, we would love to hear from you your reflections on the lessons learned during the pandemic, and also the importance of youth participation as protagonists in this debate. And also from João Pedro, we really want to hear you about the challenges to increase children participation. As Alves said, not just working for children, but also with children. So how can we really improve youth participation in this debate? So you have the floor for the next 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Fabio, and the colleagues from SaferNet Brazil for inviting us today, and happy Safer Internet Day to everyone. I'm Sabrina Vorbau. I'm a project manager at European Schoolnet. We are based in Brussels, and we are coordinating the Insafe and InHope network of European Safer Internet Centers as part of the Better Internet for Kids project. And we're doing so on behalf of the European Commission. I'm here today to talk a bit more about what we are doing, how we're ensuring youth participation. I'm also the coordinator of the Better Internet for Kids Youth Ambassador Network. And I'm sharing a specific best practice example with you as we have been working and coordinating on behalf of the European Commission a consultation throughout last year, where we, of course, try to put children and young people at the heart of this process, because children and young people are the future. And we believe that they should sit around the table when Europe's digital decade is being shaped and built. Because young people growing up in time where being offline, of course, and we all know this, is hardly an option anymore. And this new generation understands and embraces the digital world in a different way than older people do. And sometimes as well, these includes policymakers and other stakeholders who are sitting in the driving seat when rules of the internet and its governance are being shaped. So we do believe that youth engagement cannot anymore be a nice to have. It must offer genuine possibilities for meaningful participation so that policy making is based on the real needs and has also effective and a positive impact of the young people's life. And this have been, so to say, the guiding principle in this digital decade for youth consultation process we coordinated. This, as I said, this has been also acknowledged by the European Commission, with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declaring this year, so 2022, as the European Year of Youth. The outcomes of the Digital Decade for Youth consultation offer, in our opinion, valuable data and evidence to ongoing processes at the European Commission that both currently looking into Europe's digital future. On the one hand, the consultation outcomes are helping to shape a set of principles, which also include child online protection and empowerment, and on the other hand side also lay the foundation of a new European strategy for better internet for children, which is due to be launched this year in spring. Almost 10 years after the first strategy was adopted. So how does this look more or less in practice? The consultation exercise is, of course, done by the input of many people that worked really hard and were very enthusiastic of being involved. So we at European Schoolnet, on behalf of the European Commission, organized consultations with children and young people from March to August last year. And we did this with the support of the Insafe network of European Safer Internet Centers and also other European online safety and child rights organizations. Over 17 consultation sessions were carried out. So overall, the voice of more than 750 children and young people across Europe were taken into consideration and were being heard, which of course sets a very high standard in how to ensure meaningful child and youth participation in digital policy making. Also to ensure that the protocol we developed for these consultations with children was fit for purpose, we created a youth advisory board that validated the approach. that was taken, and João, who is with me on the panel, was one of the 8 young people that were part of this youth advisory board. So I let him, of course, share best practices and some experience he had being part of this group. Everyone in this group was between the age of 15 to 21 years old, and they are involved in our Better Internet for Kids Youth Ambassador network. And we met with them throughout the process of putting the protocols for the consultation together. So we really involved them at an early stage in this policy-making process, which I think is a really important thing to do, to involve young people right from the beginning and not only at the end when the resource or the activity is done and then hand it over to them and let them work with this. In addition, it is also important to say that we wanted to make sure, because we're talking about the digital decade of Europe and the future of the internet, to also make sure that all EU citizens had their say, and especially also other important actors that play a very important role when making sure that the internet is safer and better for children and young people. And this, of course, at one hand are teachers and educators. So we also found it very important to, of course, get their feedback. So we organized a massive open online course last spring, specifically for teachers and educators. And through this online course, we consulted them as well on similar questions that were posted to the children and young people in the consultations. In addition to this, to make sure that literally everyone could participate, we also launched a public survey and promoted it on social media channels in order to reach, for example, parents, social workers, and other important stakeholders. Then we looked at some of the preliminary findings, and these were then at a second stage also presented to other stakeholders that are sitting in, are more involved in the decision-making processes. So we also held close consultations with industry representatives, policymakers from national ministries across Europe, and also we sat together with the research community. So we really wanted to also assure a full multi-stakeholder approach in this whole consultation process. To conclude, I would like to highlight some of the findings from this Digital Decade for Youth consultation. There's a full report that you can find on the Better Internet for Kids portal with all the outcomes. So if possible, I will share the link in the chat after my intervention. But just some takeaways is that, of course, we know that children and young people spend a lot of time online. And of course, the pandemic made the digital interaction even more excessive. Children, and especially younger children, might be more naive in relation to the bad things which may happen online. Nevertheless, children and young people tend to have a balanced and critical view on risk and opportunities they are confronted with. For example, they understand that social media companies are driven by business interests, which may result into data privacy risks. However, it is worrying to see that after so many years, cyberbullying continues to be flagged as a systematic problem where more needs to be done, and that hateful content or advertising also continues to reach the screens used by children and young people when it clearly should not. While leisure time has largely moved from offline to online environment, parents don't seem to sufficiently be aware still of the problems that children and young people may encounter. They often lack the required knowledge and skills. And in some cases, young people also felt that some of them simply don't care that much. The fact that so many children and young people also in Europe are still not fully included in the digital world is troublesome. And this is something which needs to change, also keeping in mind the European Union's 2030 digital targets. To conclude, I believe this was a very eye-opening process to work on the Digital Decade for Youth consultation, and the report clearly underlines once more the importance of children's rights to be heard in any decision-making processes that affects them. And with this said, I'm happy to hand over to João to share more about the work that he has been doing and share his experience in being part of this Youth Advisory Board and the whole process. And thank you very much.
Okay, and I'll take it from here. Hello, everyone. Bom dia a toda a gente. João Pedro speaking here. I'm from Portugal, and I'm really happy to be here today with you all. So happy Safer Internet Day, everyone. To present myself a little bit, and as Sabrina already kindly mentioned, I've been Better Internet for Kids Youth Ambassador for almost 9 years now. So besides my professional role of data scientist, I've taken an active role on online safety, digital literacy discussions, and best practices for or since an early age. And it's actually nice to revisit the SaferNet team, because when it comes to internet governance, I'm happy to say that my first experiences were actually through with the SaferNet team. I can also say hi to some colleagues also on the panel today that I met in person already a while ago, and hopefully we'll visit or meet in person soon in new forums. But when it comes also to the internet governance field, I've been also interested in joining on different initiatives, from the Youth IGF movement to the YouRead Youth Committee, and several partnerships with ISOC and ICANN that I think that are interesting to mention. When it comes to the engagement and participation, in this case from youth perspective, I would say that being inclusive is a very important word to use. When it comes to the consultations, I think it's very easy to admit or to recognize the importance of doing youth consultations on online safety. But the consultation is important. I would say that the consultation process is also as important. And here is where I'm really happy to say that joining Sabrina team on the designing sessions of the Digital Decade for Youth consultation report is really a best practice to talk about. Going through the different points of the process, making sure that it was on the right tone and using the right language to be presented and worked with young people could only be done by having this inside information of working alongside young people on the draft of the process itself. So I'm really happy to say that from the beginning, there was this effort to make sure that young people's voice was included, and I think that's also it was therefore a little bit also reflected on the feedback reported from the consultation. So from the points that we saw from the survey, there was also some policy priorities. Sabrina kindly mentioned a little bit on the findings, but there was also important points in terms of policy priorities. And I have a few here. So there was a need or a sense of necessity for having access to the digital world for all children and young people, and this need to be taught and given accurate information on how to use digital technology in a responsible and positive manner. At the same time, it was also important to bring adults to the conversation for this accurate information and knowledge transmission, because to some extent, the online behavior and experience of older people from the family perspective and broader community, this shows how important it is to create awareness for everyone to empower young digital users. And this ruling and teaching by example is something very important that sometimes we disregard, and is also a note for the policymakers that need to agree together with industry, therefore on minimum standards when it comes to children's and young people's digital media experiences, and to make sure that the rules are being enforced. So of course you don't set the rules if you're not able to enforce. And these were several points that came out from the survey and from the young people themselves. A few points that I have here to mention is, of course, the strict balance between engagement and participation. And here, throughout the years, I think there's a lot been done on both sides. It's always easy to recognize where young people are participating, and you can identify several programs, several processes. I would say that it's much more difficult to identify where they are being or they are engaging properly and they stick around. And here I give again a big kudos to the Better Internet for Kids initiative, because from what I've experienced and from the newer generations already that are part of the process and the program and involved at the different levels, from the Safer Internet centers to the big youth ambassadors network, that it's a program that makes young people stick around and continue making a continuous contribution to a better internet. So I'd say that's really, if else, I'm a great example of it, of this continuity of the process. And I speak for myself, of course, but also hopefully for the rest of the group, that this experience, it's also in some sense life-changing, not only for me, but hopefully for other young people.
Thank you very much, João. Thank you, Sabrina, for your impressive presentation. I think you both mentioned the idea of involving or having the participation of children in the beginning of the process. I think this matter of time is very important, and this gives me the opportunity to call an Asian Pacific or Asian perspective, if you like. And I would like to invite Jennifer Chung and Jenna Fung, both from DotAsia, Hong Kong, and they can develop more on this perspective, especially as a member of a very important institution on internet governance. I would like to hear from you. How do you assess the importance of programs and actions that promote citizen safe and responsible use of internet among children, but considering the scale of those projects, if they can be in adequate scales and among multiple stakeholders, né? So how multiple stakeholders can be involved in the process. So please, Jennifer and Gina, you have the floor for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you, Fabio. First of all, happy Safer Internet Day to everyone. My name is Jennifer Chung, and me and my colleague Jenna Fung, we both work for the DotAsia organization. We are a not-for-profit organization that's headquartered in Hong Kong, and we are the registry operator for the top-level domain .asia. So not only do we do that part of the work as part of the critical infrastructure of the internet, we actually do a lot to give back to the Asia Pacific regional community, especially in the form of internet governance activities and different programs. And Fabio mentioned, there is a lot of programs that we have pioneered, a lot of things that we've done in the past. One of which we actually did for our 10-year anniversary, celebrating, the top of DotAsia. We did a youth mobility index in 2018 just to take a look at the opportunities and mobility of young people in the region in terms of education, in terms of work, in terms of entrepreneurship, and all of that. And I feel like it's time to update it now, 5 years on, looking at, especially in the pandemic world. But I really do want to focus on a couple of our key programs, especially when we're talking about capacity building for youth and training youth to teach other young people what it's like and what internet governance is. One of the events we do have is netmission.asia. You'll hear a little bit more about it from my colleague Jenna, since she first went through the program and now she's my colleague at DotAsia and she is coordinating the program entirely. And then there's also some regional activities that we do with other regional partners in Asia Pacific, such as the ICANN Asia Pacific Hub, ISOC in Asia Pacific as well, and then KISA, which is the Korea Internet Security Agency. And that part of the program used to be an annual intensive, a 1-week intensive course that is held in South Korea in Seoul. And it is to bring together tertiary and also younger youth participants who are interested but do not participate currently in internet governance. And it's very interesting to try to translate something that's supposed to be a 1-week intensive kind of a summer camp, a summer school for these young people into something that's virtual. And it's quite challenging because for these young people, they don't particularly know what it is. They are digital natives, but to be sitting in a space where they are discussing policies to do with the internet, discussing, decision-making policies is something quite difficult to translate to online. So from a 1-week intensive course for last year in 2020, at the end of the year, we translated this to an 8-week program, and it was still quite intensive because it was twice a week, 2 hours, so 4 hours a week, and we had all the mentors from all the supporting organizations. So we also took the time to do a one-on-one with all the participants in the course, because it's very hard to replicate the sense of community and the sense of building that network when we are looking at each other through the screen, through Zoom. So taking more time for mentors to do one-on-ones with mentees is one thing that we had to translate to. And then when we're looking at retaining the young people, to not only just drawing their interest into participating in these programs, but retaining them to keep them in the internet governance ecosystem is definitely a challenge. I'm so happy that we heard from João earlier, and we'll probably hear from Jenna afterwards to see how we looked at this challenge, particularly in Asia Pacific, since we are a region where, of course, the bulk of the population is, and the bulk of young people there also rely quite heavily on the internet. One more thing I wanted to bring out before I pass the floor to Jenna is that we are also the Secretariat for the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. And this regional NRI, we switch host countries every year, but obviously since the pandemic, this has not been able to be done. Last year, we were able to do a hybrid version together with our host country, Nepal. But even then, it was quite difficult because with the changing landscape of travel restrictions, pandemic restrictions, and all of that, even for local participants in Nepal, or even in the more localized region of South Asia, it was very difficult for participants to actually travel to the physical location. So that also had to be translated to a virtual program. Now, our fellowship program every year for this is quite a valuable opportunity for young people and young professionals to be able to, get a first foothold into the space, to understand the policies, to understand the issues that are surrounding all the discussions that we're having, and to make this more valuable both to the youth and to, I guess, the continuing community. We had to redesign a lot of the parts of the fellowship programs because there's competing interests right now for a lot of young people, a lot of students. All of their classes are online, all of their social life is online. So why would they, think about joining yet another online program about a topic that they haven't heard before, internet governance? So I would like to now pass the floor to my colleague Jenna, and she actually will tell you a little bit more about our marquee program, netmission.asia. It is a program where we train youth to teach youth about internet governance. And she's also newly elected in the steering committee of the YCIG of the global IGF, so it's the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance. So maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about that as well. So I'd love to pass the floor now to Jenna.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for covering most of the things I would like to talk for an introduction. So I'll just quickly skip that and might just give you guys a little bit more insights about the youth program, netmission.asia, and the youth initiative that I mostly take care of, which is the Asia Pacific Youth IGF. So NetMission Academy, it's some online academy that we provide trainings about internet governance to young people in Asia Pacific. And we have been doing it virtually since 2019. Then I think 2 years back, then we have this pandemic hitting us. And I think the first year, the young people are excited about virtual events or training. So many of them get signed up and getting involved. And especially with this global crisis, I think many of them getting to be more aware of the internet issues because people start to care more about privacy or the data protection. So it is a good opportunity for us to actually teach them how young people could do to make their cyber experience a safe one and what they could do to educate the next generation all together with our power. So NetMission Academy provides regular trainings and about some internet governance issues, not only cybersecurity, but other things, including digital inclusions. And nowadays, we talk a lot about sustainability and how internet or technology affecting the environment. So this is like a training session. We hope to cover most of the fundamental stuff. And so this young people who go through this training can go back to their own community and educate their peers in their own way. As you might know, Asia Pacific is a really diverse continent, and many people from different countries might be facing different issues from their own perspective. And so we hope this kind of capacity building can help them to achieve more and close the gap and digital divide in the regions. And going to the regional events that we offer to young people in Asia Pacific, that's a youth IGF. I think we have it everywhere, especially in the past 2 years at the global IGF. The Youth Summit has been a great success to actually gather young people from all around the world. So that inspired us to do a little bit more in the Asia Pacific regions. Also, we have some different innovations in the program design in terms of using some mixed language for particular session at the event, and through some interactive games, we get them introduced to internet governance itself, because we believe if we want to create a safer internet and a more inclusive cyberspace, we need the young people to get engaged, and that's one of the way. But of course, we didn't expect that the pandemic actually prolongs for a little bit more right now. And then, of course, we don't get to meet in person and collaborate a little bit more. But taking the opportunity that we get access to all this education opportunity or this collaborations opportunity, just like today, we don't have to be in person in a particular country, but we still get to talk to each other, sharing our experience and network with one another. That helps us a lot to understand our weakness and do the improvement in the future. And so we also consider some of the things that we could be improved in the past, and hopefully the coming year we could provide more support to young people to participate in internet governance in long run, because in the past they might not have enough support, not only on financial but in so many other ways. For example, they might not feel inclusive enough because things that they are facing in this internet governance world is just a little bit too difficult for them to continue. And so our goal this year is not only to teach them and get them join training session, but we hope that they could stay joining the youth IGF, then the regional one, then the global one, taking advantage of my role as a coordinator of this youth initiative and a steering committee member of YCIG for the coming year. I hope that the young people could do a little bit more in their own roles, and so we could bring young people together at not only the regional scene but at international level, that we can do a little bit more for the community. So far, that's the thing we could learn from this pandemic in our region, and I hope that with the sharing today, we can learn from each other a little bit more and know what's exactly the situation is in different regions of this world. And I believe with all our work, effort, and power, we can finally make our internet safe and inclusive to the expectation that we hope one day. And so that's all from me. If Jennifer, you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. If not, that's all from us today.
Thank you very much, Gina and Jennifer, for your insightful presentation. I think you both raised one question very interested on the idea of translation, the debates of that there might be technical or very difficult, and how we can translate and innovate in engaging these people. And I think that our last speaker, Guilherme Alves from SaferNet Brazil, could also comment on that. So what are the challenges to engage adolescents and young people in those types of issues that might be perceived as very technical or difficult to understand? So how you can translate this in the context of Brazil, especially where SaferNet acts in the last decade, promoting the cautious in safe use of internet in the country, and if you think there are some differences in the moment nowadays because of the pandemic in terms of the vulnerabilities that you perceive online, and also especially because in the context of Brazil, you have a long period of remote education and children dealing very closely with screens. So I would like to hear from you, how do you see the change in this period, and also what can be done to translate this to the young generation? So please, Guilherme.
Thanks, Fabio. I'll be speaking in Portuguese, but first let me say it's good having Jenna, Jennifer, and João here. We've been together in many other internet governance forums. So it's great seeing you guys and being able to understand what you're doing, what projects you're been doing over the last year. So thanks for the invitation. Okay, now in Portuguese.
I will talk a little bit about the perspective and our experiences during the pandemic with projects that focus on the engagement of children and adolescents. There have been many changes, many expectations of changes, and difficulties in follow-up processes. I will talk specifically about a project that we conduct with SaferNet, supported by Facebook. During the design of this project, since its onset, we wanted this project to be adaptable and flexible. We needed to make a lot of changes to be able to follow up changes in remote learning, hybrid learning, on-site learning, and to be prepared for these challenges was crucial in this project. An important point has to do with a very specific case in Brazil that is connectivity. There are regions in the country where connectivity is very poor, the quality of connectivity is very poor, and that has impacted how the participation of youth in activities. We had some young people who were ambassadors of the program. They were trained by SaferNet. They were encouraged to think creatively about new activities, and they held activities with the youth, with other adolescents remotely. And along these 2 years, we needed to create a project that would be adapted to schools that lacked connectivity enough, like that could not have a video conferencing like the one we're having. So this is a challenge because we need to be prepared for different situations that might have place in different scenarios we may face. In our program, it is important to leverage active methodologies that will engage adolescents. And that is aligned with what João mentioned about putting children and adolescents to actually be part of activities. So through the use of an active methodology, we did that, and we used that even in the training session we had for our ambassadors. So we not only conveyed messages and knowledge, but we wanted those young people to be engaged and to think about it, to be engaged in building the program, so that in the field, as ambassadors, they will be prepared for the various situations that might face, and they would be prepared to engage other adolescents in this conversation. So because of that, we're going to have a very specific channel of conversation. Sometimes it is difficult for teachers or for parents to talk to young people, but when we have adolescents talking to adolescents or to children, it is easier for them. They can use their own language, they feel free to ask questions and give opinions. It's very important to have an open channel among the youth, and that was crucial to our program. There are also the pros and cons of virtual education, remote education. Of course, we are tired of being connected at all times, or Zoom fatigued, or we're connected to meetings all day. And this is true for adolescents and children who participated in our activities. But remote setting has also made it easier for some people to communicate. Those who are shyer, usually in a face-to-face activities, they could participate through the chat, they could open their microphones or not, they could open their cameras or turn on their cameras or not. So it is a way of establishing an environment where they can communicate and they could participate in the way they wanted. And sometimes we are in a remote class and all you can see is the teacher who's just sharing the screen. But this does not mean that students are not reflecting on what is being said or not participating or listening. It's important for them to feel comfortable. I think that accepting that was important during our project as well. Another point I would like to raise has to do with the diversity of those who participate in the project. Brazil is a very large country, very diverse, so it is important to be aware of those diversities We should be aware to the fact that there are ambassadors from different areas of the countries with different backgrounds who operate in different settings. Some ambassadors are law students, some ambassadors are journalists, journalism students, and we have people with different interests and with different backgrounds and professions. And by doing that, we have a constellation of talents. In their regions, they also take into account regional perspectives. We shouldn't have a project that would only take one single perspective on what digital inclusion and citizenship is, based on the perspective of one place or one group of people. So it's important to encourage young people to think about what are the challenges in your city, in your region. Internet is a network that connects everyone, but it connects people differently. So people's expectations, what they want to do using the internet, they're different. We should take that into account so that we would not have a top-down project or program. This is why I said it should be adaptable and flexible. And that was important throughout the whole program. And to wrap up, I like to say that we got directly in contact with schools. Schools involve students, staff, teachers. Teachers were challenged in the pandemic because everything took place very quickly. In the case of Brazil, in a couple of months, remote classes were not used in the past for teaching to teach children and adolescents. So teachers for the first time had to conduct a virtual class or activity, and it was very difficult for them. So it was important to support teachers in this process on how to guide them so that they themselves could guide their own students in the good use of the internet. And that's a cross-sectional approach, talking about safe use of internet, talking about privacy. This is not a specific subject in the curriculum. This is something that we touched upon in different subjects. So it's important that all sorts of teachers are prepared for that. We should support and respect teachers in this process. That was very important for us. If you run projects that work with schools, this is a crucial element in the approach. That's the only way you will be able then to reach the youth. So these are some of the challenges that we faced. It was challenging, but at the same time, it was very exciting to follow up what happened remotely, then in the hybrid model, and now we also, now that we're going back to the on-site teaching, we want the project to be there too, and we want adolescents to be able to continue the project themselves, to be creative, and to maybe create a marathon, to create something that will be engaging in their school, in their community. That's what we've learned. And it was nice to hear from other panelists, their perspectives, their regional experiences. And it's interesting to see that we have some common challenges among us. And we are in different countries and different continents, but there are some challenges that are common to all of us. And at the same time, there are some challenges that are different. It's very good to have a space like that to see what went right and what didn't, so that we can move on together. It's very good to have an opportunity for discussion like that. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'll turn over back to Fabio.
We are out of time, but we have time for a quick round of questions. I think this is very important. I'll pass the floor to the group of youngsters that are ambassadors of the Digital Citizen project here in Brazil. They are together here in São Paulo for the past 3 days working on issues related to this digital citizenship. So I'll pass the floor to Wilson, Guilherme, which will do the first question to the group, and then we will have some questions from the chat. So Wilson, are you there? The group from...
Here I am. Hello, everyone. And I will speak in Portuguese. Okay, this is part of my political needs. A digital citizenship program was created in 2020, and we have to face pandemic challenges. In the past 2 years, we had to cope with the new alternatives to guarantee a digital critical environment. In Brazil, the access inequalities and internet access, they are giant, as Guilherme has well said. Therefore, we have to consider not only the big centers, but also the suburban areas and those remote Amazonic areas. And that is clearly stated in a document of one of our ambassadors, which says about the multiple voices which are excluded. And they were excluded not only from basic rights such as education, work, and professionalization, but also they were excluded from the digital means. They were the main means to mitigate inequalities. But my question is, based on your experience, which strategies would you consider effective to be implemented as political measures that will mitigate those inequalities that are experienced in some regions, such as the Amazon region in the case of Brazil and some other suburban areas? I would like to close my talk mentioning a Brazilian rapper. I see on TV what they say about youngsters. Youngsters in Brazil are not taken seriously, but we, Brazilian youth, will design a new speech to guarantee that each child, adolescent, will be taken seriously to have their rights kept and guaranteed. Thank you, Wilson, and to your team. Great intervention and question.
In right the same direction of, I think, in the right direction of thinking about policies. So what are perspective for scale projects like this to policies in considering the remote education? And if you think that you can include this type of intervention in the public policies of education, beyond going into small pilot projects, but how to really build this into the educational policies within the context that you have in each country or region. So I'll propose a final round of interventions from our speakers. We don't have much time, so I'll please be very brief in your pointing to this discussion, and I'll propose to do the opposite. So I'll start by asking Guilherme to do the same, and we end with the opposite direction here. So please, I'll pass to Guilherme. Very brief in 2 minutes. What can you consider from the questions?
Well, first of all, we have to think about a representative type of public policies. There are those which still exclude some players, and in addition, countries, they see their public policies different and they might exclude different players. So first of all, we have to consider public policies from a national and global perspective, and not to embed a foreigner policy which will not encompass our diversities. In addition to that, we should include not only those experts, such as decision makers or those who have a background on that, but rather to include others, educators, citizens, common regular citizenships to participate, contributions that may be given by those who are far away from the decision tree process that can be extremely relevant and effective, and they are usually not considered. And that can be applied not only for connectivity policies, internet policies, but by any sort of internet policies that would like to include social policies. It's important to have a participation environment that will be bureaucratic, accessible, and that will be friendly environment to all. Moreover, we should be able to follow available technologies that will guarantee high quality connectivity. Connectivity that we had 20 years ago is totally different than the one we have nowadays. Internet access nowadays is different from the one we had in the past. So we should not make use of outdated sort of technology. We should have a minimum quality internet access that will follow current patterns in terms of internet access. For instance, low broadband internet quality or low velocity quality. How can someone participate at an online Zoom discussion? We in Brazil, but not only, there are those who have internet access just via their mobile phone with a very limited data access. There is a high level of limited data usage, and they are not able to freely navigate it over the internet to access different content, because that would require more broadband or velocity or content distribution. So that should be considered in the middle to long run to allow better quality access to all.
Which both mentioned this question on how to scale the projects and to include in the educational system. So I'll pass the floor to Jennifer and Jenna, if you can make your final contributions on this.
Sure, thank you, Fabio. Really important question. I guess speaking from the Asia Pacific perspective, it is very difficult to kind of sum up in such a large region, because in our region there are countries and states that are very resource rich countries, and then there are countries who are not as resource rich. And we also, especially during the pandemic, there's been some political upheaval in certain countries like Afghanistan, like in Myanmar, and even internet shutdowns, of course, happening everywhere. So not just due to, connectivity, in that kind of band setting, but just, from a country top-down policy, it is very difficult. I think lessons learned, especially when we were discussing during the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum, we saw some e-education case studies from Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, which looked at strategies in Central Asia to deal with the challenges of education posed by this pandemic for the rural communities. It is very difficult to get, of course, connectivity there at all. And they combated this with doing offline libraries of education materials, which is very interesting. So, trying to continue this education with children in the rural setting in this way. And even when we're looking at economies like Vietnam, there is a big lack of devices. Lack of devices is a big problem for children and youth to continue education online, because if they don't have a device, they can't do any education on their computers, on their laptops, or connect and continue that way. And there's a lot of strategic public and private partnerships happening, and it's scalable as well. There's, of course, the big tech companies, and of course from the government too. And there was a big push, I think, in Australia to look into connectivity when we're looking at libraries. It has become kind of like a focal point for a lot of communities to continue to access digital services, citizen services, government services, and of course, education services for people who are not able to connect. And then finally, I just want to end a little bit with, a project that we're looking at DotAsia. We're the stewards for the policy setting for the top level domain .kids. This is an internet space that's supposed to be kids friendly. And I think that is also kind of the next step, to have youth and to have children to sit at decision-making tables to influence the policies that affect them, not just being passive observers, to be able to make the decisions, to kind of set the policies on how this space is supposed to, evolve and grow. And I think that is one of the most important things. We need to include them in decision-making roles. Thanks.
So Jennifer basically given already a lot of examples from the Asia Pacific. So I guess I won't be repeating it, but I would like to actually provide some first-person examples from some interactions with some net mission ambassador in the program and how they're coping with this kind of like connectivity or social factors or political reasons for not being able to connect it to get their educations or get connected with us for many reasons. Because some of our ambassador, they are from Myanmar, and I think given the political reasons, they have regular shutdowns right now. This does not only limit their chances and access to education, but also for some people who are in our community trying to solve problem and help people in their own country. Smallest participations like youth engagement in internet governance got affected. So let alone some other engagement with other parts of the world if they are trying to let people know. So I think if us in some other parts of the world having the privilege to have of good internet access and connectivity, we should not leave them alone. And I think while we are trying to provide a safer internet and an inclusive cyberspace, we should also be aware of what is happening in other parts of the world and knowing what they're facing in their own country. And so we could help them in that kind of way. That's the only thing I would like to add. And that's what I directly learned from some other youth ambassador volunteer throughout this program when I'm trying to coordinate. And I would like to share with all of you here today. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you, Jenna. Now Sabrina and João, what are your perspectives on this debate?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question and putting a spotlight on this, because I think it's clearly time that we not only think global, but also truly act more global, and just bringing in a bit the European perspective. And of course, a lot of people might think that connectivity or accessibility to devices, it's not such a big issue here in Europe, but this is actually what I mentioned during my intervention. One of the results of the consultation with the children and young people showed that it's still an issue, that there are still a lot of remote areas also here in Europe where there is no accessibility and also not given even the possibility for children and young people to connect. Of course, having a device and having the access is one thing. I think another important thing that we need to improve is also to put a much more focus on awareness raising and participations in the different regions across Europe. So a lot of activities or, for example, events are happening in the capitals, for example, and of course this limits access for some youngsters. So I think what we are also trying to do and what we are, our colleagues in the Insafe network have been doing also with the consultations, also to really go out in the regions, to go where the young people are. We know that a lot of safer internet centers take the opportunity of holiday seasons to go to different areas of the countries where they know that children and young people spend their vacation there, or visiting youth camps, to really go where the young people are. And this needs to definitely go beyond the capital. I also personally are very happy always when working with the young people for our annual youth panel to really see that we are able to bring people and connect with young people from across Europe, and of course the EU bubble and the decision-making activities here in Brussels seem very far away from them for a youngster who, for example, connects from a more remote island in Malta or Cyprus. But I think initiatives like Better Internet for Kids and the Big Youth Ambassador Program trying to bring young people who are from these remote areas, give them an opportunity to more actively participate and also connect them with children and young people who may have more possibilities. But I clearly think that when it comes to awareness raising and participation, we need to do more to go to the rural areas. For example, as I said before, making sure that if we go back to hosting face-to-face events, they're not only happening in the big capitals, so that we really ensure that everyone who's interested gets an opportunity to participate.
Yep, and not to echo on everything else that has been said already, I'll just have two quick points. So when it comes to access and quality, I think this is, of course, a multi-objective problem that you cannot solve with a single strategy. Of course, there's different problems of accessibility and quality of access in different places. So instead, I think to tackle this self-reinforced issue, you need to have parallel strategies for the different spaces. Of course, I don't bring magic recipes for this, and I think it's an ongoing conversation that has to involve not only governments but also other stakeholders, many times private sector based. But I'm more focused on the second question, and I think it's really interesting how to scale small projects into bigger policies. I'm biased probably because I'm part of the Better Internet for Kids, but I think here is really the example of local action under a broader strategy. And this might provide a hint to the question raised, meaning that I think small projects are indeed necessary, again, because of the local perspective of the internet, the network of networks, meaning that you'll face different problems and issues regarding different communities and the places that you're addressing them. But this doesn't mean, of course, that you don't have a common and shared vision of where you want to bring the internet to. So again, echoing the vision and the work done at the internet governance space and ecosystem, I think this is a great strategy and a great way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, João. And now, Albo, we would love to hear your final remarks.
Right. So much has been said already. The few I could add to it is to emphasize the participation in the internet governance forums, if only they are being organized at the country level, because participating in such forums help a long way to making your voice heard and your needs identified. And you could even be part of the solution process. As a civil society, I might go with a crazy approach, but then that is not for this platform, because we want you to be decent and engage appropriately in the space. So I have shared two documents as well in the chat. Those could give you an idea. For instance, the one you could engage with directly as a private citizen is the Partner to Connect initiative by ITU. When you connect with that, there are partners on board that you could leverage on their initiatives and bring that to the local level for your local use. For Africa, most of the countries now are engaging on the ITU Giga project as well, which is meant to deploy internet to the schools and give young people devices for them to engage with. So those are sound initiatives that I thought could be helpful in your situation. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your very insightful and interesting discussion. So we are out of time, so I would like to thank you, the organizer, and thank you all for participating. And now I'll give the floor to Rodrigo to set the next steps for the event. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Fabio, for the excellent moderation in this panel that was so enriching. It's interesting to see how diversity is really a common challenge and accessibility as well. Not only access on itself, but also inequalities between countries, inequalities between schools in terms of abilities of using technologies responsibly. And now that we have new technologies such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, so it seems that this inequalities gain scale, not only in neighboring regions, but also in the center of cities. And that happens even in Europe. And this is why we need to keep this agenda throughout the year, using digital technologies on a daily basis to face inequalities, both old and new. I think that all of us realize that this can only take place if we involve children and adolescents directly in this process. Not only listening to the youth, but also engaging them directly in building responses and assessing those responses. We also need to monitor the actions that we are implementing. Thank you very much, Fabio. I would like to announce a 5-minute break because we are going to have another short panel announcing new projects. We are going to have Neide Cardoso from the Federal Prosecution Office that is going to announce some interesting programs and initiatives about fighting misinformation in an election year. We are also going to have Miriam from Fung from Cert.br, who will talk about interesting materials for digital safety and security. And also we are going to talk about SaferNet initiatives. So we will be back in 5 minutes to continue the last panel before lunch break. Thank you.